Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this Legislative Assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, today I have the honor to extend on behalf of the members of the Assembly, through you, a special welcome to a distinguished visitor to Alberta who is seated in your gallery, His Excellency Dr. Adiwoso, the Ambassador to Canada from Indonesia. And I would ask that he rise and receive the welcome of the Assembly.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 93, I have taken the petition of the Board of Trustees of the Canadian Native Friendship Centre building for the Board of Trustees of the Edmonton Canadian Native Friendship Centre Building Amendment Act 1986 under consideration and wish to report that to the Assembly that Standing Order 89 has not been complied with.
Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Speaker, I beg leave to table the annual report of the Grant MacEwan Community College for fiscal year 84-85.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you and through you to the members of the Legislative Assembly the Chief City Commissioner from the City of Red Deer, Mr. Michael Day, who is also a recently appointed member of our Labour Review Committee. And with Commissioner Day are three senior people from our engineering department, and I'm not sure if they've declared it a civic holiday down there, but with him are Brian Jeffers, the city engineer, Ken Heslop, and Pat Granger, and I would ask that they rise and receive the warm reception of this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the federal government has announced the granting of some $125 million to Nova Scotia for offshore energy development, as well as annual payments for a portion of the Crown share of revenues. Mr. Speaker, this follows on the failure of the Ottawa Conservatives to live up to the signed commitment to provide $780 million in loan guarantees for the Husky upgrader, and of course the continued imposition of that famous four-letter words, PGRT. Mr. Speaker, it seems again that the Conservatives are taking Alberta for granted. Right. My question is to the Premier, what assessment has the Premier made of this announcement? Is it not again the thumbing of the nose to Alberta by the federal government and an ignoring of our serious problems facing us?
Mr. Speaker, I would ask the Minister of Energy if he may have an assessment of the agreement.
Mr. Speaker, the agreement basically replaces the 1982 Canada-Nova Scotia Agreement on Offshore Resource Management and establishes a new offshore oil and gas board to administer and regulate all aspects of the offshore oil and gas activities. And it does, however, convert a previously established loan of $200 million to a grant, and some $25 million will be made available for a particular company to explore and develop offshore. In addition, there is a cost-sharing mechanism between the two levels of government so that Nova Scotia would be involved in revenue sharing and also be able to set royalties much the same way as other provinces would be able to. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see that that Nova Scotia and the federal government have reached this agreement. In no way do I see that jeopardizing or having any impact on any discussions that are taking place between this government and the government in Ottawa. Our officials are meeting today to discuss the proposal that we put for them. I understand things are going well and hopeful of an early agreement.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've heard that before. My question is to either of the gentlemen who's ever talking for Alberta. It seems I would point out these grants to Nova Scotia fall on talk of $1 billion in loan guarantees for Hibernia. My question is to either of the honourable gentlemen, have they communicated any specific concern about the similarity of these proposals to provisions of the National Energy Program, which drove investment out of the Western Basin to the offshore at public expense, and if they haven't, why not?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't understand what the honourable member is saying, what he's driving at. We are having our discussions with the federal government, and we are happy to see that Nova Scotia is able to reach an agreement. I think the honourable member is wrong in the fact that there has been a Hibernia agreement. I don't think that's has occurred yet. It sounded as though he had said that. But we consider things to be progressing, and we will continue our discussions with the federal government to address the concerns of the energy industry in this province, the country.
Supplementary question. I could give a lesson to the minister that if there's investment there, it drives it out of here, but he doesn't seem to understand that. Let me go back to the Premier, who might understand that. Has the Premier been able to assess and why Atlantic Canada seems to be able to negotiate rather successfully with the federal government, while our approach seems to lead, frankly, to failure time after time?
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Minister of Energy has just explained, we are in the middle of negotiations with the federal government. There are some things that don't go perfectly all the time, and you just work a little harder at them and try to make sure that they do work. I don't think it has any relation to what's going on in the Maritimes.
Supplementary question. We all work harder, Mr. Speaker. That's very nice. My question then probably to the Minister of Energy, but if the Premier wants to answer, that's fine too. Public statements that just came out by the Prime Minister indicate that he believes that his government has done such a wonderful job for the West. I'm sure the Minister saw that. And he does have one point, though, and that is that Alberta government got everything it asked for in the Western Accord. My question is, has the federal government conveyed to the provincial government that the Western Accord was what this government wanted, and therefore they believe that they have lived up to their end of the bargain?
Yeah. Right. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Western Accord and the natural gas pricing agreement were agreements that were the result of the federal government and the provincial government and industry agreeing to go in a particular direction, and the industry responded to those two agreements. And it wasn't, of course, until the prices started to fall that we encountered the industry problems that we're having in this country. But in terms of our discussions with Ottawa, as we've just repeated over and over again, that our officials are meeting today, and I expect to meet with the federal minister and in terms of what's happening elsewhere in the country, there's no relevance as far as I'm concerned to what is happening in terms of our discussions with Ottawa.
Supplementary, Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. How effective has this government been in communicating the grave state of Alberta's oil industry when the Prime Minister of this country is able to say this morning that Alberta has already received a great deal of assistance?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't answer for the Prime Minister. He says what he wants to say. I must say I think we have made our point with the federal government, the Alberta caucus, various officials with the federal government very clearly, and they know what we believe in, what we stand for, and what is necessary to help the industry in the future.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'd like to direct the second question, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Labour. Mr. Speaker, while the Minister spends time on the phone with his travel agent, prolonged and bitter disputes continue at Gaynors, Suncor, Ziedler's, and of course elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, my question is, because we were unable to get to this yesterday because we didn't have a budget, but could the Minister indicate if there is a ceiling on the amount of money with which this committee will be able to spend, and if so, what is that ceiling?
Mr. Speaker, it's impossible as yet to set a figure for the expenditures for the committee. I have said many times in this House we intend to do the job fully and thoroughly, as the Premier, myself, and indeed the throne speech have said. For example, I have no firm itinerary for the committee within the province of Alberta, even at this time. We obviously are going to have to pay the members of the committee a per diem for the work that they're going to do and the time commitment that they are making, and that many of them are taking from very busy schedules. Depending on the number of days that the committee meets and many other items, I can't give the Honourable Leader any approaching limit on the figure at this time.
No. Supplementary question. This is a new approach to business. Just spend whatever you have and take as much time as you want. Right. My question to the Minister, they talked about per diems. Is the Minister saying that they haven't even worked out how much the committee members are being paid to be on this committee?
That was not what I said, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I like the way the Minister is so forthcoming. I guess he's embarrassed, and so he should be. Yes. My question is then, how much are these people being paid then to sit on this committee?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the figure is $250 per day.
Well, that will be interesting to a lot of people in Alberta, Mr. Speaker. I thank you for that answer. My final supplementary then, Mr. Speaker, I believe the Minister indicated yesterday that the whole kit and caboodle of the committee will visit every country that they decide to go to. My question is, if we can't get to the budget, how much it's going to cost, is there any estimate how many assistants, secretaries, bureaucrats, and other staff will be accompanying the committee on this jaunt? In other words, how many people are we looking at by the time we're finished?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader appears to be under a misapprehension about the purpose of this committee. The committee has been appointed to do a full review of the labour legislation and to make sure that the legislation, such changes as may be required, that the legislation will fulfil the requirements of fair and reasonable labour legislation. In other words, that it will provide a framework for open discussion between employee and employer. The intention is to try and decrease the confrontatory nature of labour legislation and labour relations. The intention is not to go out and spend money unnecessarily, and with my accent it would be a little strange if we did. The committee will consist of the 9 other members and myself, the necessary support staff, who are estimated to be 3 or 4.
Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Yes, I'd like to direct a question to the Ulysses of the front bench there in this odyssey that he's going to go on through the old world. Could he promise that he would submit a budget to us before he goes on the trip with his entourage rather than after he comes home?
No, I can't. Mr. Speaker, I can't make a firm figure. Perhaps I should draw to the honourable member and the other people on the other side the fact that this is a sincere attempt to address concerns of Albertans, employees and employers. We are, on this side of the House, this party and this government are sincerely interested in the individual welfare of individual employees in this province. We have that commitment in the past, we make that commitment again, and we will continue to be in the future. The budget will be what is necessary to make sure that the rank-and-file members of the unions, that the individual employers, and indeed all Albertans are well served by Labour legislation. That is the purpose, and what is necessary to achieve that purpose will be spent.
Supplementary question, Red Deer South.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister of Labour please advise us? Dave Whirlin has done more damage to the labour movement in this province than any other single factor. We on this side of the House, are anxious to see.
Honourable member. What is the supplementary question without the introductory stuff?
Could the Minister please advise us of the status of the membership of this committee, or are people like Dave Whirlin still trying to prevent meaningful labour review by discouraging prospective members?
I'm sorry. Chair recognizes the main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier. The Premier has indicated at the recent annual Premier's Conference that the lessening of interprovincial trade barriers is a top priority. Now, has a meeting of provincial first ministers been scheduled, intergovernmental ministers, I guess I would say, been scheduled to discuss the strategies for lessening these barriers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and that meeting has been held. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Economic Development and Trade went in some detail about that in the House. Previously, the honourable member may not have been here, or not been part of that question and answer, but it's definitely been dealt with in the House.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, I don't think so, because no specific initiative. Okay, what specific initiatives were taken by this government to hasten the formulation of a strategy to knock down provincial intertrade barriers?
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Alberta took a major role in establishing the process that took place in Belleville in June, where the ministers of trade dealt with this matter of bringing down and reducing interprovincial trade barriers. And subsequent to that meeting, it was dealt with by the premiers at the First Ministers' Conference, where the concurrence was sought and obtained by all the governments of Canada, and the premiers instructed the ministers, the respective ministers, to accelerate the process. There is a scheduled meeting of ministers of trade, I believe on the 10th of September, which this matter will be discussed. There is also a ministerial meeting to be held later on in September in the Yukon, where the matter will be further discussed in terms of the process. Now, one of the key elements, and it was in the communique, if the honourable member had read it, was an examination of all of the existing barriers and an inventory, which is being done now by all of the jurisdictions. And then the work will be done by the ministers to attempt to dismantle those as quickly as possible.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, in view of the fact that he said the Premier is instructing the trade ministers, could the Premier then elaborate and say what sectors are slated as the top priorities in negotiating reduction in barriers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it would be in the whole area of interprovincial trade barriers, and no particular area picked out. I think it would be unwise to try and select one or two, but rather to deal with the whole broad picture.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, a question whether that's an effective method, but nevertheless, would the Premier like to tell the House when he expects that a Canadian body similar to GATT interprovincial trade will be in place in reducing interprovincial trade barriers? When would you forecast that moment?
As soon as it's possible to work one out, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Edmonton Norwood.
Yes. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Recognizing that this is a very difficult area because provincial governments are going to tend to look after their own jurisdictions, is there any assessment by the Alberta government whether this has helped us or hurt us in terms of the barriers, specifically in Alberta in an economic sense?
Mr. Speaker, earlier in the House I referred to an examination of this situation that the government has undertaken over the past 3 years, and also our consultation with the business community in terms of their access, or their access to opportunities in other jurisdictions. And the assessment, not so much by the government, but by the business community, was that they felt that the opportunities for Alberta business to participate in the economic opportunities across this country would be enhanced by a lowering of barriers, as opposed to Alberta getting into the situation where we erected our own trade barriers. And that was the premise from which we moved in order to urge other governments to dismantle their trade barriers. We continue to hold that view because the economies of scale that can be established by companies and manufacturers and businesses having access to opportunities nationwide as opposed to within a restricted environment of their own jurisdiction are attractive, particularly to Albertans who continue to have that entrepreneurial spirit.
Member for Edmonton Glengarry, followed by the member for Calgary Buffalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the Minister of Environment, the Town Council of Gleason is faced with the cleanup of Taylor West Industries in that community, but they're rather cautious of the danger to their employees and possible costs of cleanup. By unanimous resolution, the Council asked me yesterday to come and try to convince the government that they have a need for assistance in determining safe cleanup procedures of this abandoned industry. To start with, what testing has been done to identify what is in the numerous barrels of chemicals which have been left behind in this abandoned business on Main Street?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding that research undertaken by the member from Edmonton Glengarry, it indicates that in a number of barrels in Gleason, Alberta, that there's really no chemical that causes any danger to anyone. I'm not sure either that the research of the member from Edmonton Glengarry has verified that in fact it is an abandoned site. And perhaps if the gentleman does have information that could conclusively prove that it is an abandoned site, I would very much appreciate receiving such. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, it would seem to me that there's provisions under the Litter Act for any municipal official in the province of Alberta to cause their local bylaw officer to take immediate action to rectify the problem identified hypothetically by the member from Edmonton Glengarry.
Okay. After a little over a year, they're concerned it has been abandoned, especially when correspondence was ignored by the business involved. I'm wondering about the word that the company got, that because these chemicals were in barrels, they weren't in the environment, and it wasn't the Environment Department's policy, therefore, to test them. And I'm wondering how this policy applies to the rusty, open, and dented drums that were left in this unfenced field bordering Main Street in the town.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I checked incoming calls into my office earlier today as a result of a newspaper article with respect to some drums that are stored in Gleason, Alberta. And I have no knowledge of any contact from any official with the town of Gleason asking me as the Minister of the Environment to undertake any action with respect to this particular matter. It's not my understanding either that any contact has been made with the Pollution Emergency Response Team, which is on 24 hours a day standby with respect to such items. And if this matter is of the magnitude as identified by the member from Edmonton Glengarry, I would like him to know that earlier today I directed Alberta Environment officials to go to Gleason and undertake an immediate review of the matter. Mr. Speaker, I would like to point out that I would have done that on any day since May the 26th, the day in which I became the Minister of the Environment, but until today had no knowledge of such matters. So if the matter was of an immediate emergency kind of situation, I only wonder why there was such hesitation in the eyes and the minds of certain elected officials in Gleason in not bringing this matter to the attention of the government and having the government basically to learn about it by reading a newspaper article.
I appreciate that response. I might ask then what the minister plans to do about the official who visited there, cautioned them that if there were a fire not to be downwind of it, and seemed quite concerned, and then the other official who later phoned and said that nothing would be done. These officials should most certainly have apprised the minister, and according to councillors, the entire council, they were there. Will the minister guarantee to check into that as well?
If the member from Edmonton Glengarry would be so kind as to give me the names of such officials in the Department of the Environment, the member from Edmonton Glengarry can be assured that the Minister of the Environment will have a talk to find out with these particular individuals, to find out what transpired from their perspective. And if it turns out that anyone was derelict in their duty, they'll have more than just simply a talk with the Minister of the Environment.
In view of the fact that 3 sons of the owner died in the facility and the death was caused by chemicals that the owner has admitted are still there, will the minister guarantee that he will, as the council has requested through me, to advise them on what are the best and safest cleanup procedures so that they can continue behaving responsibly as they have?
Well, that advice is always available, Mr. Speaker, and it has been available before the date in which I became the Minister of the Environment. If this is a matter of great concern to the council of the town, of the municipality of Gleason, and if this matter had been around since 1981, then someone is derelict in their responsibility in not bringing this matter to the attention of officials at the provincial level and individuals within Alberta Environment. I have no knowledge, as I repeat again, of any contact being made. It does not go unnoticed whatsoever that one of the councillors in the town of Gleason was a defeated NDP candidate. And I just wonder why games are being played if safety is a matter of concern to the individuals who live within the municipality of Gleason.
Calgary McCall, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Is the minister saying that that there has been no formal request to the minister or his department by the municipality of Gleason for assistance or an investigation relevant to this item brought forward? And if the minister is to take some investigation, would he also consider investigating the reasons as to why it was not brought forward if it is a matter of danger?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to repeat to the House and all members that there's been no contact, to my knowledge, with my office since the day that I became the Minister of the Environment, and that's a fact. That's a fact. And if this is a matter of major importance to the individuals who live in the town of Gleason, I think it's a matter for them to evaluate in the next 6 weeks, as all municipal councillors will be seeking re-election.
Member for, this is a supplementary, West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the minister. It's commendable that he keeps a record of all complaints coming in to him. But does he not have the administrative talent to set up a number of, to keep the same policing for complaints that would come in other sectors of the province? Is it the only way you can make a complaint is calling the minister? What about these other regions around the province?
Well, absolutely not. The member from West Loch Sturgeon obviously wasn't listening. I indicated a little earlier that we have in place on a 24-hour service basis to all of the people of Alberta listed in all of the telephone books in the province of Alberta, a telephone number that will access something called PERT, which is the Pollution Emergency Response Team, works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year. And furthermore, to the honourable member from West Loch Sturgeon, yes, the Minister of the Environment receives in his desk every morning a complete listing of all the calls that were made to the PERT system in the previous 24 hours, and yes, the Minister of the Environment reads every one of them.
Calgary Buffalo. Buffalo, followed by the member for Edmonton Belmont.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, last Friday this House showed commendable leadership in promoting tolerance and understanding by passing a unanimous resolution on the subject. However, there's much more important work to be done in this province on a regular and not just a once-and-for-all basis. Can the Premier tell this House why the government has not followed the Gitter Committee recommendation of December 1984 to establish a permanent standing committee of this Legislative Assembly to promote tolerance and understanding?
Mr. Speaker, in every report that the government receives, there are recommendations of one kind or another. Some are followed up on, some are deemed not to be necessary. Not having been here at the time the report was received, I will check into the reasons for following up on some, not others, and if I can, give the reply to the honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, to what degree has the Premier demonstrated some personal leadership on this matter by involving himself in questions of promoting tolerance and understanding in a review of the Gitter report recommendations? That is, if he's read the report.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure myself, plus all members of the Government Caucus, express our views and become involved in every way possible in matters like this.
Mr. Speaker, has the matter of promoting tolerance and understanding even been discussed in the Cabinet since the Premier took office?
Mr. Speaker, I don't go into the details of Cabinet discussions, but the answer is yes.
Mr. Speaker.
The question was indeed out of order under Beauchesne 360 subsection 2, seeking information about such matters of their nature secret, such as decisions or proceedings of Cabinet. But please continue.
Mr. Speaker, the question was not with relation to the content, but merely the general topic. But I'll pass on. The Keegstra affair is now 3 years old. Will the Premier promise some early action on the issue by moving to set up a standing committee of this House on tolerance and understanding, and by taking other positive measures to promote tolerance and understanding, and if so, when?
Mr. Speaker, I answered that question originally in my first answer to the honourable member. The government has moved in a variety of ways, and I think in this province we have outstanding leadership in this whole area.
Member for Edmonton Belmont, followed by the member for Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are directed to the Minister of Municipal Affairs regarding the appointment of Milt Paul. The province has a 34% equity interest in Native Venture Capital Corporation, which is 3 times as many shares as any other of the shareholders. I'm wondering if the government issued any policy direction to the representative on the board about the propriety of appointing a former Minister of Native Affairs as the Chief Executive Officer of the corporation.
Pork barrel. No, Mr. Speaker. No suggestion was made to the directors as to what they should do when the position became vacant.
Mr. Speaker, the advertisement for the competition for the position of President appeared in the Edmonton Journal on April 26th while Mr. Paul was still Minister. What assurance can the minister give this Assembly that Mr. Paul did not receive information as minister which may have given him special inside track on the appointment to the job?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has already pointed out that the matter of the competition was so public, it was in the advertised, I would assume, career section of one of the daily papers.
April 26, Mr. Minister. How many other of you are looking? Given that the taxpayers have an initial equity in the corporation of some $2 million, will the minister advise the Assembly as to the salary Mr. Paul will receive?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member should know that the structure of the Native Venture Capital Corporation is that of a private company. It in no way is controlled in any respect by the government. And the government, it's true, has one member, as I understand it, on the board of directors. The other shareholders are represented to a significant degree in the sense of the total board being something like 12 or 14 members. And the private sector investors, and that's what they are, this is a company created under the Business Corporations Act. The private sector investors, I would think, do control the board and the naming of directors to that board, and my judgment would be, having heard all there is to hear on the subject from the honourable member just now, that that judgment of the board was exercised independently.
Final supplementary then, Mr. Speaker. Did the government establish any policy for the director on the board of the merits of appointing a native person to this position? And if not, why not?
Mr. Speaker, in appointments of significance in the public service, that is one thing the government can try to achieve, is to look at the prospects for Native people and see that those prospects are advanced. I've already explained in respect to the Native Venture Capital Corporation that it is a private corporation under the Business Corporations Act, and my understanding is that no finalists, after the competition was advertised and closed and the interviews were held, no Native person, to my knowledge, was in the finalists.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, this is to the Premier. How can he reconcile this appointment of an ex-cabinet minister when he assured the House less than a month to two questions in the opposition that he would be considering a year cooling off period before ex-cabinet ministers would be appointed to anything?
Well, Mr. Speaker, first of all, the government was not making an appointment. This is a hiring from a private sector group. I see no comparison whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. There was no discussion at all about whether or not someone who serves this province as a minister should then somehow, or as an MLA, should then somehow not then be able to be hired in the province in some area controlled by other than the government. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I find the whole line of questioning shows a remarkable degree of a lack of class by the honourable member.
Member for Edmonton. Member for Honourable member, the chair will recognize you when your front bench is settled now. Member for Edmonton Avamore, followed by the member for Edmonton Calder.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education, in light of 4 years police investigation of the Church of Scientology in Ontario and the laying of charges in Toronto in 1984, can the Minister advise this Assembly what steps she has taken other than accepting the written assurances at face value to ensure that Scientology techniques have not and will not be taught in the Beanstalk School?
Mr. Speaker, we have dealt with this matter in the House on at least 3 occasions, and as I have indicated, the the Beanstalk School, rather, is operating with the permission of the Department of Education as a Category 1 school. In order to do that, and in order to ensure that a portion of provincial funding flows to that school, the school must meet the standards of curriculum set by the Department of Education and employ certifiable teachers. I have also indicated in this House that the Beanstalk School has offered an affidavit which states that they will not be teaching Scientology within that Beanstalk School. As to other steps which I may be considering, I can say that one of the questions I am seeking some advice on is the matter of the affidavit and whether or not the commitment made not to teach a certain religion within a school system is in fact an infringement on the rights protected in the Charter of Rights, and I am looking at that question currently.
Mr. Speaker, given the Minister's concern about the school, why does the Minister refuse to make inspection documents on the school public, given that Scientology has a consistent worldwide reputation that British Justice Leahy has called hypnotic and anesthetic processes which educate children on a lifetime allegiance to a cult?
Mr. Speaker, as with all schools which are monitored in this province, including public and private schools, I have said in this House, and I repeat, that I will not make public internal reviews by the Department of Education. Where that review becomes a formal process under the Department of Education Act, there is ample opportunity for that report to become public. Let's stand.
Speaker, can the Minister explain what evidence she has to support her assurances that the school is meeting the approved curriculum? That is, are the inspectors there every day?
Every day? No, they are not, Mr. Speaker. And I guess one of the questions one has to look at here is that the resources of my department, which are applied to the monitoring of all schools in this province, are finite resources. And I do not propose that all of those resources be channeled towards the review of a certain type of school. In this case, as I have indicated in this House, the school is meeting curriculum standards, is employing certified teachers, and I am satisfied now that the school is meeting those requirements. If I weren't, my answer would be different.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, between June of 1985 and 86, the Workers' Compensation Board provided $8,000 to Education Alive for tutoring contracts, while the Department of Manpower between January of 1985 and April of 1986 gave Education Alive over $7,000. As the head of the government responsible for all of these departments, can the Premier advise why this government seems to insist on giving money to this educational offshoot of the Church of Scientology?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the matters raised by the honourable member, and I'll look into it and advise her.
Supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Education. Can the Minister confirm that members of the board of the school and teachers of the school are also members of the Church of Scientology?
No, I can't, Mr. Speaker. There is a board set up, board of directors of that school, which is constituted to hire staff. As I have indicated, the teaching staff must meet certification standards in order to be a Category 1 school. With respect to who that board of directors hire, that is clearly a matter within their jurisdiction.
Member for Edmonton Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, the Minister stated on August 14th and again on August 18th that a decision on Rosehaven Institution in Camrose has not yet been made. I will remind the Minister that a letter was written by the by the Minister of Social Services on April 7th, 1986, that specifies where East Rose patients will go upon being discharged. Will the Minister now admit that a decision on the closure of East Rose Ward at Rosehaven has been made and was in fact made prior to his aforementioned statements?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I believe that that a decision was proposed. A plan to change the nature of Rosehaven was proposed, and any action on that proposal was not to take place until the then Minister of Social Services and Community Health had visited Rosehaven, and that visit was rescheduled shortly after the appointment of a new Minister of Social Services and a new Minister of Community and Occupational Health. I had the good fortune to visit Rosehaven just about 10 days ago with the member for Camrose, and I've had the benefit of a very good review of the facility, discussions with officials and my colleagues since, and I look forward to making a decision on that matter in the days ahead.
To the Minister, further to the additional funding of $175,000 for the Rosehaven Day program, has the department finalized any contracts with Camrose residents for provision of approved homes for future day program participants?
No, Mr. Speaker, that has not been done, and that is one of the obstacles to making a final decision. It is our hope that we can take those residents of the East Rose wing of Rosehaven and place those who are capable, those who are able to live on their own in a residence within the community, in an approved home or of any other kind of residential situation like that, and to put those people, place those people in a setting where they can live comfortable, satisfying, productive lives. And that is the first, that care, the priority of quality care is just that. It is our priority.
Time for question period has expired. Might we finish this complete line of questioning? Opposed?
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister satisfied that clients in any ward at the Rosehaven Institution will be able to move into the community at this or any other time, despite the fact that some of the clients are between the ages of 65 and 80 years old and have lived in institutions up to 40 years of their lives?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that some of the residents of the Rosehaven home can move into the community, and I can show the honourable member a very good example of a home that I visited in Raymond on Wednesday last, where we were able to assist the community of Raymond to provide residential housing for 6 residents of the Raymond home who had, amongst the 6 women formerly of that home, now living on their own in a lovely home down the street from the Raymond Care Center. Those women had amongst them 275 years of institutionalized care. Today, They are happily living in their own homes with their own bedrooms, very proud of that facility, which the member for Cardston and I had the honor of participating in the opening of.
Final supplementary. Can the minister tell us then if his position is shared by the majority of professional staff at Rosehaven that work with these residents on a daily basis?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I believe in discussing with both the management staff and members of the union of that facility that they would help us, would help the medical people in our department, and working with the medical staff at Rosehaven. Yes, I believe they could identify some of the residents, particularly some of those in the East Rose wing, who could live in an approved home-like setting within the community of Camrose.
Supplementary, Edmonton Goldbar.
Mr. Speaker, in the light of the considerable uncertainty and anxiety that obviously surrounds this decision, I'd like to ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, if discussions not only with the staff and board, but with the community and families are continuing to be held.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the ongoing, yes, there are ongoing discussions with the community. It is our hope, just as the honourable member for Calder was asking in her question, it's our hope that we will be able to find approved homes or sponsors within that community, within Camrose, who can provide that kind of residential setting for those people to move to when they leave East Rose.
Yeah. Orders of the day. Might we revert briefly to the introduction of special guests? Member for Taber-Warner.
Thank you, Mr.